Lou, winter is coming and we're going to start facing frosts in the Highlands. I really like the appearance of a frost. It's just, for me, a pleasure of living in the Highlands. But is frost all good? Like, I know I've lost the odd plant.
Well, yes, not so great for some plants, but they do vary quite a lot. So frost is basically a soft white ice crystal that develops close to the ground. And when we lose the heat at night time, no sun, no warmth, temperature drops down. The temperature of the ground becomes much lower than the temperature in the air. Mm-hmm. And when that temperature hits zero, it is going to make the vapor in the air turn to frost crystals. So that's how come you get that deposit on the fields and things. But sometimes, you'll get it maybe on the car, but you won't get it on the path under the car. Mm-hmm. So different materials have different levels at which they become frost, if you like.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so a metal
when they
is
freeze. Yeah.
When they freeze, that's right. So we sometimes get frost hollows. That's when the cold air, which is always heavier than the warm air, slid underneath the warm air closer to the sun that isn't there, or the moon, and it just slides on down into the hollow, into a valley floor, where frost can form and the hills remain absolutely fine. No frost at all.
I read that it moves like water.
Yes, and I've actually seen it slide. You can sometimes see it sliding down a slope into the valley. And that's the cold air, which is basically heavy. And so that's why it's sliding down below the air that's warmer above. So for plants, it's not a good thing. Plants will freeze from frost. Sometimes it's just the soil that freezes. Sometimes it's the tips of the plants that freeze. The real problem is when the roots freeze. You do not.
Right. Yeah.
That really is cactus time.
I lose plants to frost every year.
Yes, and it does depend on the severity and how long the freezing time is. And some plants, like the cold climate plants, many of which we have here in the Highlands, they can actually survive rather better because they have this mechanism, this evolutionary mechanism called dormancy. They sort of like bed down for the winter. They not only lose their leaves, but they also stop the amount of water in their branches and in their trunk and so on and so forth. So there's less to freeze. And they actually have a sort of antifreeze in there.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So I read that the mechanism, what's causing the harm is that the liquid inside the cells of the plants freezes and actually splits the cell wall.
Yeah.
So
it explodes.
It explodes. It might be a bit graphic, darling. It breaks down the cell wall. So it's irretrievable damage, isn't it?
Well, not always. I mean, but if you're getting to that point, and different plants, like fruit trees can take, I think, up to about -6 centigrade.
Oh, right.
After which they are liable to die. But on the whole, frost often isn't a problem. It's there and it might make the tips go a bit black, but hang in there. Don't do anything. Don't cut the tips off, because then you really are exposing the little branches to water in the cells. And next frost, they could come again and do it more fiercely. So the best thing is just to hang in there. But, you know when something's dead, don't you? I mean, it's probably happening at the root level.
And what about protecting plants from frost?
Yeah, you can do a lot of things, actually. If you've got little seedlings, you can just put a plastic bottle over them. Because frost doesn't occur when there's a good cloud cover. The cloud cover creates a blanket, preventing that warm air rising and leaving the atmosphere. So if you can create...
it makes the warm air a further blanket.
Yeah, so your job is to make an artificial blanket for your plants. So some people will put hessian over them. You can put shade cloth over them. So you can literally pick up your pot plants, put them under a tree, which will act, maybe a big tree that will act like a blanket. So there are a number of things that you can do to save your plants, really. Mulch is another thing that you can do. That does to some degree, stop the frost reaching down into the soil and therefore into the roots. It can just be a little surface frost.
Mm-hmm. And choose your plants carefully.
Well, with many plants, I think if you've got a heart's desire plant and you know that it has a propensity for frost, if you take care of it the first couple of winters, very often that's all you need.
Yes, I've found that. If I
Yes,
nurse them
me too.
through, they
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be put off. I mean, if something's heavily frost prone, maybe hold off. When they tell you it's going to be 3 tonight, the ground temperature is often lower.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so you might get a frost with only 1 or 2 degrees in the air. It might be freezing at the ground level.
There, yeah. So one thing that I read that I didn't know was that because these are little ice crystals, that some gardeners kind of take advantage of the fact that a frost is coming and they break up the soil, they turn it over and leave it in kind of loose clumps. And if it's dry, they dampen it down a bit. And then when the frost comes, the ice formation actually breaks up the soil for them, so that after a frost or a few frosts in a row, they actually have soil which is more friable because the water, as it's frozen, has expanded and broken down the soil.
Ooh.
Oh, so that's news to you?
Yeah, it is news to me. Yeah.
And another thing, I read what they refer to as a killing frost will help check rodent populations and prevent the spread of cane toads, kill some undesirable weeds, break the breeding cycle of pests such as fruit fly, and can even help kill pathogenic fungal spores, limiting reinfection.
Yes, well, I guess it's going to knock things out.
Yeah.
Anything that's living.
Yeah.
Mm.